Welcome back. My name remains Edward Dunku, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Accountants of Nigeria (FCA). After the intro that you will have watched in the previous video, you are welcome to our course one, the definitions of payroll administrations. Now, as a payroll manager or payroll administrator, a payroll bureau, a payroll clerk, or a company or an organizations, there is need for us to have a clear understanding of some terms. And some of these terms, some are being misused over time. Some people don't really get the difference in their meaning. So on this course one, we really want to look at the definitions because the foundation of payroll is based on your understanding of what payroll administration is all about. So I want you to take your time to listen to this very interesting course, and it's still free for now. As time goes on, it might end up to become a paid program. And my name still remains Edward Dunku. As I've said earlier on, I'm from Blue Atlantic Consultancy Services. We act as a payroll bureau. We help you to manage your payroll. We help you to support you in putting in a very good payroll structures to the benefit of the staff. We also conduct payroll audit, we conduct head count, and anything that has to do with payroll, please don't forget to get in touch with us. And also, kindly subscribe to our YouTube videos and also put your comment in the comment box below for us to be able to continue the engagement on payroll. Now, I quickly want to go to the difference between payroll and payroll administration. Now, from the word payroll, is made up of two words. So we have the pay and we have the roll. So the pay is the amount that an employer and an employee agreed to be paid over a given period for a considerations for work done or work to be done. While the roll is the list or the records of which the pay and the staffs are being kept. So if you combine the two together, you now have a payroll. And what about including the word administration? Administration is generally like adding the administrations into the payroll. So what do I mean? So it's about the processes. It's about the payroll cycle. It's about the record. It's about who does what, responsibilities, expectations, timeline, and all that. Everything that has to do with the organization of how the payroll is managed is called payroll administration. Now, we also need to look at the funnel of these payroll administrations. So we have the salaries, we have the wages, we have the bonuses, we have the allowances, we have the timesheet, we have the we have everything that has to do inclusive in these payroll administrations. And also in payroll administrations, you have the other stakeholders like the government regulatory agencies, the labor unions, the general public, all forms what we called how you manage all of them all together is what we call payroll administration. So payroll administration is far much beyond making payments, getting out receipts. But how do you defend your payroll with relevant government agency? The National Insurance Trust Fund, NSITF, how do you manage the deductions? How do you manage the calculations? The ITF, Industrial Training Funds, how do you manage the payments? The pay as you earn to relevant government agencies, how do you manage that? And also in terms of other allowances that you pay to your staff, how do you also manage that? So payroll administration is all activities, processes, analysis, recording, presentations that you do are the function of payroll. And also, when we talk about the other items in terms of the definitions, we're looking at what is payroll strategy. I do mention in my first introductions that I'll be looking into payroll strategy. So, but what is payroll strategy itself? So, we'll be looking into that particular definition, what payroll strategy is and what payroll strategy is not, and who is responsible for formulations of payroll strategy. And around these payroll strategies, we'll be discussing about the schedules. So, at the end of your payrolls, what are the reports that you generate, and who is responsible for those reports? What are those reports going to do? And what benefits do you have to create as many schedules as possible? We also be looking at payslip. Now, payslip is a statement that is being given out to staff. We'll be looking at the definitions of what payslip is all about. And all these things are around payroll strategy. Then we now look at some other items in the payroll and their definitions. What do they really mean? We talk about statutory deductions. What are statutory deductions? Why are they called statutory deductions? Are they deductions that are mandatory? Are they not? We also be looking at voluntary deductions. What are they? What are those items that make up the voluntary deductions? What is expected of an employer to do when making certain deductions from the staff salary? Now, we want to look at the pyramid of payroll itself. So, in the pyramid of payroll, we have what we call the gross payment cost, we have the gross pay, and we have the gross emolument. What are the differences in this particular pyramid of gross emolument, gross pay, and gross payment cost? What do they really mean? We're looking at them in details in these definitions of payroll. Now, let's quickly look at all these things. And when we combine all these things together, you can say whether an organization has a very reliable payroll structure. And I can tell you the payroll structure is based on the input of all these definitions that comes together. And don't forget that the wheel, the engine behind this wheel is actually your payroll strategy. So without wasting so much of our time, we now want to go into the differences between payroll and payroll administrations. And when we talk about payroll administrations, we'll be talking about the payroll life cycle, or better still, payroll cycle. Now, where does the payroll start from and where does the payroll end? Is it a straight line? Is it a circle? Is it a vertical and all that? But in all payroll administrations, the most important thing is your data input. That's what is usually called garbage in, garbage out. And during the course of more of our courses under the payroll implementations, we'll be telling you more about what is data input, which information is relevant, which information is not relevant, at what point in time do you gather these informations, and at what point in time do you change them. And when you talk about data input, you just need to know from who, by who, and who really needs it. And immediately after you gather your data and you've input them, there is need for what we call data reviews. Now, data reviews will, under these implementations, we're looking at it like, look, who is responsible to review this data? Because an error that is made during the data input needs to be checked before further processing of the payroll. So if the data are not properly reviewed, there's always a tendency for it to contain some errors. And it's usually during the data reviews that we need to identify some risk to payroll, like a ghost workers, on end overtime, and other items on payroll. People are regular absentees from work, and they are being paid for the service not being done. Then we need to analyze this data. So after a review has been done of what has been inputted and we feel that look, we are good to go, now we need to analyze this data. And analysis includes dividing it into your earnings, into your deductions. You need to look at you need to analyze the deductions. Is it a statutory deduction? Is it a voluntary deduction? Who is responsible for that? And when the payment is being this data is being analyzed, what are we going to do with it? And the analysis is also very, very, very important in a payroll cycle. Now, after the data have been properly analyzed and you've generated some of your schedules, we'll now be talking about reporting. Now, when it comes to payroll, the reporting, which is an output, I'm going to call it a data output. That is the point where you have gotten the analysis of the net pay, you've gotten the analysis of the deductions, you've gotten the analysis of the gross earnings, and you've gotten the analysis of all the total payroll. So you need to report. Some reports goes to the management, some reports goes to the staff, some reports goes to the union, some reports goes to pension managers, some reports goes to the government tax agencies, and all and on and on. So the issue of reporting cannot be overemphasized. I would really want you to look out for our training on payroll implementation. So that is where we'll be taking this payroll cycle in more details. And finally, which is the pay. You cannot complete your payroll cycle or your payroll administration without having to make out payment. And that is why that word pay is part of what we are discussing about. So your payment is very important. So at this point, we're looking at how much goes to the staff, how much goes to the union, how much goes to the government, how much goes to the pension, and how much goes to loans and every other person. So this is where the payment comes in. And during our legal framework and compliances, we'll be looking at timelines. At what point, at what time is it legally required for payment to be made to all that is consigned on payroll? And until payments are made and people are credited and all the payment have been done, your cycle cannot complete. And after that payment have been made at the end of a particular period, it will be daily, it will be weekly, or monthly, or biannual or annually. You need to fall back to the beginning of your cycle, which is your data input. So at this point, you've completed all these processes. I just decided to narrow it down to five variables, but under real life situations, they could be far much longer, but we'll be looking at that during our course on payroll implementations. Now, let's look at some narrative to this. From my own definitions, I said payroll is a record of the earning due to an employee for work done or to be done over a period of time, or a list of earnings and deductions from an employee for activities to be carried out or done over a period of time. So, still saying the same things. So, whether the payroll is just more about record keeping or payroll bookkeeping. So that is what the payroll is all about. While these records are being kept, we have to be very conscious of the timeliness of those records. And some payments could be hourly, some could be daily, some could be weekly, monthly, or annually, as I've said earlier on. So for all these payments to be complete, we need to have a very good payroll system. Why payroll administration, as I've used my payroll circle to explain that, is the process of managing employees' time work, money earned, or deductions from pay. And this process include recording, analyzing, paying, remitting deductions to appropriate government agencies and also other people. Now let's look at some other definitions and some differences. The word salaries and wages. Well, they are always usually used interchangeably, but do we have a labor law? Do we have a government law that help us to differentiate the two? But based on the research that I've made, I came to realize that salary is the amount agreed between an employer and an employee to be paid to an employee as consideration for job to be done to an employee by an employer at a given time. So, so the period in line with the contract of employment. So for you to actually earn a salary, are you a salary earner? For you to earn a salary, there must be contract of employment between you and your employer. So if there is no contract of employment between both you or both of you, I will say you are not a salary earner. So in that case, what are you? You earn wages. So what does the labor law 1974 says about wages? Wages means remunerations or earning, however designated or calculated, capable of being paid or expressed in terms of money and fixed by mutual agreement or by law, which are payable by virtue of a contract by an employer to a worker for work done or to be done or for service rendered or to be rendered. Now let us look at the difference. If you put the two together, sometimes we can mistake salary for wages. Yeah, get me right. Now, in this case, it's expressly states that wages should be capable of being expressed in terms of money. So, benefit in kind is not a wages, but benefit in kinds can be included as part of your salaries. Now, he also mentioned fixed wages have to be fixed by mutual agreement or by law, which are payable by virtue of a contract by an employer to a worker for work done or to be done or for service rendered or to be rendered. Now, that is very clear. So, for a wage, I can agree to be paid within a particular period. For example, my wage can be calculated on hourly basis. So I come to work today, I work an hour, I get paid. I work for 2 hours, I get paid. I work for 5 hours, I get paid. And that has to do with wages because it just have to be by money. But in terms of salary, I can agree within my employer that, well, for me to earn this salary, I'll be entitled to an official car, I'll be entitled to sick leave, I'll be entitled to maternity leave, I can be entitled to holiday leave, I can be entitled to transport allowance, I'm entitled to house allowance, I'm entitled to different forms of allowance. That has to do with salary. But in terms of wages, it's just fixed. And we are talking about terms of money. So that is why in Nigeria of today, we have those working in some sites or in some factories and work, and their work is being rated and wages are being paid based on the numbers of days work. But in terms of salaries, salaries are earned by an employee over a given period of time. So salary is based on a period of time But while wages is based on a fixed amount in terms of what you're going to earn. So what about some other word like bonuses? So bonus is additional payment to employee apart from base pay and usually attached to certain conditions in the contract and may be in cash or in kind. So your bonus is paid on attainment of certain conditions. So you will have performance bonus that, well, these are your set KPIs. Once you achieve this particular objective, you'll be paid certain amount of bonuses. And sometimes some bonus will be in terms of time. That is why it's called overtime. That, well, if you work an extra time, you will earn this extra bonus. So which means bonuses has to be attached to certain conditions. So both the employer and the employee needs to agree to those conditions. So the key performance indicator needs to be very, very, very smart. So it has to be specific, it has to be measurable, it has to be accurate, and it has to bring in a result within a time band. So that is what the word smart actually means. Now, apart from bonuses, some bonuses can also be paid in terms of share. So we talk about profit sharing. So some profit sharing could be in cash and some profit sharing could be in equity. So you are given a portion of the company's share, which is part of your bonus. Now, what about benefit in kind? So benefit in kind include various types of non-wage compensations provided to employee in addition to their normal salary. So benefit in kind include you're entitled to gardeners in your home, you're entitled to free accommodation, you're entitled to official cash, truffle driven official car, you're entitled to different kinds of things that comes in forms of kind in kind. You are entitled to free staff lunch, you're entitled to beverage for your fridge, you're entitled to different kinds of things. Now, when you look at all these things, even though they comes in forms of kinds, some are taxable and some are not. So we need to have a clear understanding of what benefit in kind, of what bonuses, of what wages or salaries really means. Now, I want us to look at this cartoon. The cartoon was actually gotten online courtesy of Cartoon Stock and Cartoons Collection. So, well, as you can see from that cartoon, you can see an arm robber bringing out a pistol over the paymasters, and the paymaster's hands up and with a caption, "You can keep the payroll. I just want the payroll deductions." Well, I'm not referring to the government here, but for those that quite understand what cartoon is all about, it's a mandatory payment you just have to meet. You have been put the gunpoint and say, look, can I have the deductions being made directly to my account within a period of time? But that's just a cartoon, and you can actually a picture speaks 1,000 words, so you can really make out of it your own understanding of what the cartoon is all about. So it's just to make sure that we are in line with what we are discussing. Now, on a serious note, now, so back to what's the difference between payroll strategy, structures, schedules, and payslip. So along the line during my introductions, I've keep mentioning the word payroll strategy. Now, I just want to give it a brief definition before we actually goes into an in-depth understanding in our other courses. I want to say that payroll strategy is a system of formulating policies that guides how the payroll is structured. Now, I want you to get one thing right. Payroll strategy, it's about policy. policy around how the payroll structures. Now, you cannot have a payroll strategies without a corporate strategy. So, because for you to be able to have a payroll strategy, you need to have your own organization strategy. And at Blue Atlantic Consultancy, as you keep saying, can actually help you in coming up with an corporate strategy. We can organize a corporate retreat, get the relevant stakeholders, and look at the mission, look at the visions of your company, and we can really come up with a very good way to support you in setting up your corporate strategy. So, having said that, you cannot have a payroll strategy without having a corporate strategy. So, that is very clear because your payroll strategy needs to align with your corporate strategy. Your payroll strategy has to be a supporting tool in helping you to achieve your visions. It has to help you to achieve your mission. It has to support you in achieving your set objective. Your payroll strategy is all about your core value. What are your core values? What do you stand for? What are you known for? What do you want to be known for? So your payroll strategies need and has to speak to those things. And also talk about your brand equity. Now, you don't want to share the slogans that said that if you pay peanuts, you're gonna employ monkeys. It's true. So your brand equity is very, very key. And the young men of today, we really wants to work with an organizations that pay high or pay low or pay based on different parameters. So your brand equity comes in to play when setting your payroll strategy. So as I've said in our course 3, we'll be talking about payroll strategy. So this is just like a brief introduction into it and how it's going to help your organization. So watch out for that video. And don't forget to like our videos and put your comment in the comment box. We really appreciate that. And thank you for listening. And also back to our trainings, we'll be talking about payroll structures. Now, for me, I decided to say that payroll structure acts as a guide. Remember that payroll strategies, policy that guides. Now, the payroll structures act as a guide of how an employee is paid. The structures is usually built around certain models, certain matrices, certain variables in line with your payroll strategy. So everything has to interject, everything has to interwoven, everything has to align. And once your payroll structures align with your payroll strategy, which invariably means that your payroll strategies also align with your corporate objective, and with that, you are using your payroll as a tool of maximizing your organization's expectations. Now, what is payroll schedules? Now, payroll schedules are a set of records that contains a list of employees. It also contains the salaries earned. It also contains the deductions made and the net pay due to the employees and also the remittances due to different agencies. So as I've said that the output of everything that you've done will be reported on your payroll schedule. So we have different kinds of schedules. So we'll be looking into that more in our course as we go on. So we'll be talking about your payroll master files, talk about your remittances schedules and other kinds of schedules. Now, what about payslip? Payslip is a statement of earning and deductions to each employee and can serve as a tax credit note. No, though in Nigeria, payslips is you get it in the morning, you get it done in the afternoon, maybe because people consider payslips as a document that they don't really need. But when you get to advanced countries or other countries, especially in the UK, your payslip actually serve as a tax credit note. It has to contain so many informations about your total earnings, about your total tax paid, about your remittances made in the UK, about your NIC, because the HRSC is quite interested in informations on the payslip. But the reverse is the case in my country. So payslip doesn't really matter there. Whether you get your payslip or you don't get your payslip, you just know that what's important for you is to get the pay. Then the employer can keep the slips. So, but for the purpose of our training, we really need to emphasize that the payslip is equally important as well as the payroll schedule. Now, the other words again in payroll administrations that are quite funny. And as I've said, what's the difference between gross emolument? What's the difference between gross pay? And what's the difference between gross payroll costs? Now, the Pension Reform Act 2014 actually tried to give us some interpretations to some of these definitions, and I'll be picking it directly from that act on the schedules, on the interpretations. So, the law states that annual total emolument in relation to the group life insurance policy to be maintained by an employer means the gross emolument of an employee or diseased person. Now, seems I'm trying to repeat myself there. Gross emolument, annual total emolument. But let's look at the monthly emolument. Now, when it comes to issue of monthly emolument, it talks about monthly emolument means total emolument as may be defined in the employee's contract of employment, but shall not be less than a total sum of basic salary, housing allowance, and transport allowances. While the last one on gross payroll costs is inclusive of all staff related payments as a result of employment, either received by the employee or paid on his behalf. Now, by the time we'll be looking at our cost two, when we'll be talking about the legal frameworks and compliances, that is where we'll be going into in-depth understanding of what the Pension Reform Act really means. That when it comes to group life insurance policy, the basis of calculation of your total annual total emolument is quite different when it comes to retirement savings account deductions, which is your RSA deductions. So, is it possible for basic salaries, housing allowance combined with transport allowance to be less than total emolument? Yes, it is possible for it to be less than. And that is why the law of the Pension Reform Act decided to differentiate between the two and to explain to us later on what are the differences between the two. Now, what about deductions? Quickly, the deductions could be divided into two. We call it the statutory deductions and voluntary deductions. And also, there are other deductions, there are other payments that are non-payroll costs, though they are not deducted from the employer's salary. But these days, we've seen some organizations that have included non-payroll costs to payroll to ensure that what the total payment made to staff are well captured in all the transactions. So, for example, when we talk about your statutory deductions, we are looking at the deductions that are backed by relevant laws, and these include pay as you earn. So, at our next course, course two, we'll be looking at legal framework and compliances. We'll be looking at the law and the sections of the law that required us, that empowers and employers to deduct certain amount from the employee, the basis of the deductions, the calculations of the deductions, the defense of that deductions, and also the way an employer can structure the payroll in a way that the deductions can be controlled. It's called tax avoidance. So we'll also be looking at statutory deductions like retirement savings accounts. Who is responsible for that? Which law is backing up that? We'll be looking at that during the legal framework, and also the National Housing Funds. And is there any other statutory deductions from your salary that are allowed by law? I would say for now in the Nigerian law, I would say these are the three statutory deductions. However, we have some non-statutory deductions that are not mandatory and it requires the employee's consent before deductions can be made. One, staff loan. So before you issue out a staff to a staff, you have to make sure that you get a consent forms of deduction from his salary, except that you've just given the staff money and you may not have a statutory right to deduct that particular amount. Union deal. The Nigerian labor laws recognize the labor in the place of work, but make it voluntary for whoever that wants to join. So the labor you have to design a union due deduction consent form that will be filled by their members and approved before deductions of the union dues can be made. So cooperative contributions, companies allow cooperative within the organizations, and also the staff is also expected to give its consent before deductions can be made. We have the retirement savings account, the voluntary contribution. So the Pension Reform Act that in addition to the statutory deduction of 8% of the basic transport and housing, a staff or an employee can choose to, it's an option, to make further contribution into the scheme. And finally, there are other ones also. We have mortgage repayment. In a situation where a staff had decided to go into a mortgage, can authorize the employer to pay the mortgagee the amount that is due on his mortgage on month by month basis. Now, what are other non-payroll costs, but that is not borne or bear by the employee? It is the employer's responsibility to ensure that National Social Insurance Trust Funds, which is a 1% of total payroll costs, are made to the government, and this serve as a workman insurance against liability from the point of leaving home to the point of getting back home for a particular job or organization. Also, we have the industrial training funds. The industrial training fund is a 1% deduction, 1% of payroll that is expected to be paid to support the funds in terms of training, and 50% of that can be gotten back as reimbursable. The group life insurance, as I've stated in the slide above, was also from the Pension Reform Act 2014. It's expected that every employer must have a group life insurance policy that covers at least minimum 3 times gross annual salary to be paid to a named beneficiary at the point of death while the person is still in employment. We also have the National Insurance Scheme from the National Insurance Health Scheme. It's a program that is put in place to assist staff when it comes to health issues. So it covers the staff, the spouse, a maximum of 4 dependents that are usually below the age of 18. So there are other costs also incurred on behalf of staff. It could include travels and flight, include staff trainings. These are other these are other payments that forms the total payroll costs to a particular organization at a point in time. Well, let's just do a quick brain teaser. I'm sure some of you is going to get this right. And if you don't, well, it's a point to learn more. So my brain teaser comes like this. Simple, straight. Who is responsible for the formulation of policy for the payroll structure? Who? One, is it the head of HR, HR director, HR manager, HR head of HR? Is it the person that is responsible for the formulation of that policy? Or is it the CFO, the head of accounts, financial controller, finance manager, and what have you? Or the management with the CEO being the head of the management? Are they the one that are responsible for the formulations of policy, for the payroll structure? Or D, is it the board? And the board is being chaired by the chairman of the board, and we have the executive directors and the non-executive directors and independent directors. Are they responsible for formations of policy for payroll? Or the shareholders? So the shareholders in principles are the owners of the business, and they are quite different from the board, and they are sometimes different from the management or the CEO. So among these five groups, who is responsible for the formulation of policy? So I'll give you a few minutes to think about it. And my suggested answer is the board. Wow. Put your comment if you agree with me in the comment box, and don't forget to like or to comment in the box why you agree with me that it is the board that is responsible for the formulations of policy for payroll structures. If you agree with me, fine. If you don't, fine, but we can engage ourselves on that discussion. So to close out this particular course, I want us to look at this cartoon also from my favorite cartoon stock. So it's from cartoon stock, cartoons collections. Now, we have the payroll department, a beautiful lady with a handful, and we have Mr. James. So let me just call him Mr. James or Mr. Thomas. So Mr. Thomas just get a payslip. He's looking bored. He's looking like stressed out, and his hand on his on his waist. Look at what he has earned and what deductions have been affected. And you know what? The lady on the payroll stand just said, "Stay at it all you want. I'm sure no one is going to jump out and yarn." April Fool. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to like our Facebook page, and I'll see you in our course 2, legal framework and compliance. Thank you for listening. You're welcome. Hope you enjoyed it. Meet you in course 2.